All right, good.
This order.
We all have.
Okay, it's been duly noted. Everybody please turn your microphones on and put your cell phones away, and remember to wait to be called on or to be acknowledged by me before you speak. Thank you. Okay. Jamie, would you take the roll, please?
Kim Burstead. Here. Chris Freeman.
Here.
Heather Flannery. Here. Clint Moses.
Here.
Dan Paulson.
Here.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
David Steyer.
Here.
Jim Swanson.
Here.
Tricia Thompson.
Here. Okay. We're to conduct business, so moving right along. Is there any agenda order and approval revision? And with that, I'd just like to remind the board that at any time you see something in the consent agenda that you want to discuss further, then you can always have it moved to the action agenda. You don't even have to have a vote, you can just have a vote.
I just request a kind of a division of the question on the consent agenda, so we vote individually on let's say, what's called the consent agenda, looking at the wrong thing. The operating procedures for the board.
The what?
The
The board norms?
the board norms, yeah, thank you.
You want them to go into the action agenda?
No, just a separate vote. When I was reading before, I was reading on the things for open records and stuff. It says it's these major policy things. You shouldn't lump them all together in the consent agenda. You should hold some individual votes on the things because, so there's a record of the vote. So I'm just asking that that one be voted on separately, but as part of the consent agenda, action agenda, it doesn't matter, but it should be a separate vote aside from the other things.
What's the difference between doing that and putting it on the action agenda?
Either way, whatever way works best. As long as we
Okay,
get
I'd like to just put it on the action agenda.
Okay, that's fine. Whatever works.
So Exhibit 165, Board Member Norms and Operating Procedures, move that to the action agenda.
Okay, anybody else have any questions about the agenda or any? Okay, hearing none.
No, wait, we'll clarify, will be a separate item on the
Yes,
action agenda,
if
correct?
it's an action agenda, they're all separate.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, recommendations and accommodations, we have some, but we're going to wait a little bit later for those. Community communications, I don't see anybody, nobody brought anything to me, so we move right along. Okay, board member superintendent communications, does anyone have anything to say? Board members first.
Sure.
Clint?
Not exactly school related, but it is Fair Week, so if you were interested in coming down and seeing the kids show their animals Wednesday through Friday, they should be showing sheep, pigs, cattle. Kids put a lot of time into it, so it's a non-school related thing, but it's a very important thing to some families like mine. So if you feel so inclined to come down, the weather's going to be great. So that's it.
Anybody else? Dan?
Yes, I just wanted to say that we went to the conference symposium, and it was a very, very intense day and a half of really, really good, provocative discussions, presentations. I learned a lot, and hope to share some of that with folks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I have a few things. Just piggybacking on Dan, I did bring the folders that we got. One is on equity, that was on a Friday, and the Summer Leadership was on Saturday. Both are really good. I really like the equity, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but a really highlight that was for me was they have these cards that came from, I can pass these around, it came from the DPI, and what they are is whenever you make a decision on the board, you should always ask, is it equitable? Who are we leaving out? Who is this for? That kind of thing. I already gave Joe a packet. He's very well aware of it, and I just thought it was kind of cool. There are two little cards, and it's great. So I'll pass those around. Here. So you can look at those, and then many of you may have seen on the front page of the Dunn County News on July 17th, Wednesday, 2019, we have a Menomonie alum who is actually doing very well, Rachel Rapella. Her mother's actually a teacher in the school district. And she has done great things as far as is in the arts. So I just wanted to point that out. She actually has a play that she wrote called 10 Minutes Between 1:50 and 2 a.m. And it premieres at the 2019 Minnesota Fringe Festival at Mixed Blood Theater, 1501 South 4th Street in Minneapolis. Play runs less than an hour, so just want everybody to know that we do have alumni, and that's not the only one, there's plenty more out there as well. Okay, and then finally, I just have a statement that I would like to make. In a few minutes, on our consent agenda, well, actually, it's going to be in our action agenda now, we'll be voting on board member norms for the SDMA board members in the consent agenda or now the action agenda. The norms include making board members accountable for their behavior from other board members. I want to explain how this board norm worked in a situation regarding me and another board member. After the last board meeting, it was called to my attention by this board member that in the board member's opinion, I made an inappropriate and insensitive statement at the end of that meeting. Joe had let the board all the board and the board meeting attendees know there was a cycling club in town that would be staying at the middle school that evening, so not to be concerned if we saw tents on the school property. I do not remember exactly what I said, but something to the nature of good to know so that the community does not think they're homeless people staying at the middle school. I first would like to publicly apologize for that statement. It was something I could have refrained from saying and regret that it may have caused an offense to anybody who might have heard it. I meant nothing against homeless people, but most of all, I want to say thank you to this board member for making me accountable as the board norm states. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Dr. Joe?
First of all, you'll have to excuse my voice tonight. I coached the 10-year-old Little League, 10-year-old Little League team from Menomonie and played 6 baseball games this weekend. And the 10-year-olds did a great job. They won the state tournament, which was quite an accomplishment for that group of boys. So, yeah, thanks. The only thing other than the professional development opportunities in board docs is also that Rule 823. That has to do with public record requests. And based on the board's feedback, I added the term electronically, so it's clear that electronic requests can be made.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda and moving down to number 2, since number 1 is now an action agenda. SDMA Education for Employment Plan and the strategic plan, goals, and major activities. I entertain a motion.
To move to adopt the consent agenda.
I believe if you refresh, it should be.
It's refreshed.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, I'm just about following through.
She's following the paper guys.
Okay, good.
So Dan,
So we
make a
have
motion.
first a motion and who's second? Who's second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Amy, I just want to point out that the exhibit for the board member norms and operating procedures, that was updated this morning. There were no changes other than some grammar, some punctuation, some capitalization. There was no changes to any of the content.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, let's vote. Jamie? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Next, the personal consent agenda. I entertain a motion to accept the personal consent agenda as noted.
I'll make a motion.
Penny
I'll second.
and Dan. Any discussion? I do have one question. When, I know it was summertime, so I don't know, who they were able to get at such a late date and during the summer, but I was wondering about the committee that, I assume there was a committee that did the interviewing with the new AD.
Yes, we had a good committee. We had district directors, principals, teachers, coaches. How many do we have total, Sam?
It was 9.
And then we also had a teacher involved with tours of the building. So we really appreciate the staff members that gave up some of their time to come help with that committee.
Okay, all right, thank you. Just curious, because I know that with these bigger, or I mean, I don't mean bigger, but these hires that we have, administrators, sometimes I know that we have these committees, and I know like when we hire the new principal and then the new principal at River Heights, we definitely have representatives for those teachers and those things. All right. Okay, so, any other discussion? Jamie, let's go. Okay, motion carries, thank you. Okay. Action agenda. Let's go ahead and,
We should just move forward to do the year. You can do whatever you want.
okay, okay, at the bottom, okay. Right. Okay, so let's do entertain a motion to approve the year-end budget transfers.
So move.
Second.
David and Penny.
Penny Kleinerman.
Oh, sorry, Heather?
I just threw my hand up, but Heather was talking, so either way. Doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Okay, any discussion on that item?
Okay, so Leah's gonna give a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll wrap up with kind of a recommendation based on the discussion of the board. So Leah, could you share a little bit about the year-end budget transfers?
Sure. So the year-end budget transfer maximum is looking to be 1.56 million. But that maximum transfer amount could possibly leave us slightly short in the unassigned fund balance goal of the board. But we would maximize our state aid, which we would receive about 13 to 14% back if we were to transfer that full amount. It could leave, I say it could leave us slightly short on your fund balance goal because this is still unaudited yet, and we could have, our audit is next week, things could change, we could have slightly more expenses, we could have slightly less, it just depends on that whole process. Now, how we would recommend splitting up that transfer would be $1 million into our Fund 46, which is our capital improvement fund, and then the $560,000 into our OPEB trust fund, our retirement benefit fund. And the reason we would recommend the lower amount into OPEB is because of maintenance of effort, or MOE as we call it. The MOE requirement is that you maintain the same level of expenses from year to year for special education costs, unless there's valid exceptions to reduce it. Like, for example, a retirement, if you had a retirement and the new person coming in, wages were less, then you could reduce it by that. But this excess payment into OPEB would not qualify as an exception. So we want to make sure that these one-time expenses that could affect MOE, we're watching that and we don't set us up for a situation where in a future year we might not make maintenance of effort. Now, if you want to make your unassigned fund balance goal a priority, then I would recommend transferring slightly less and doing the 1.36 million, and then splitting up the same way, the 1 million into Fund 46 and 360,000 into Fund 73.
So to follow up just a little bit more, and I wrote a good narrative for the board. The board has done a great job. This is a very responsible decision in terms of transferring these funds at the end of the year to maximize state aid. And the boards of the past have done that and has really had a positive impact on the amount of state aid that we receive. The challenge is that if we do not transfer the 1.56 million, we would be leaving state aid on the table. The July 1st estimate showed that based on our budgeted spending, we would have about 7% more state aid. So this year's a little bit trickier because it is a good state aid year. Now actually is a decent time if the board wants to really maximize that fund balance goal. So there is some merit to recommending the 1.36 million, because in the event that the board feels the fund balance isn't adequate in the future, if it's a year where state aid isn't going to go up, that could be a little bit more difficult to put funds into the fund balance. The difference between the 1.56 and the 1.36, we're estimating somewhere around $20,000 of state aid for 2019, 2020. And it's not like the money's lost if it goes to fund balance, it's still available, and we'll get state aid on it at some time in the future when that money is spent. So it's not like money's lost. However, it just depends on what the goal is. The way the mill rate has been going down, this year might not be a bad year to reduce a little bit, or to make a transfer that's a little bit less, and go ahead and build a fund balance to make sure that that goal is met. It was a little bit of a change last year when the auditors suggested so much of the fund balance be moved into assigned fund balance, and based on the performance of our health insurance fund, we are anticipating that we'll see a similar recommendation this year. So it's really up to the board in terms of what you want to prioritize, fund balance or maximizing state aid. But it's not just a vacuum decision for this day or for this year. We need to look into the future knowing that it's not always easy to add to fund balance.
If we go ahead and go with the 1.3 and lose that 20,000, will that affect us in future years?
Well, again, it's not that we're losing it in future years. Eventually, if it's spent, it'll be aided. It's hard to say what aid will be in the future. You know, it could be more, it could be less. You know, this is actually the first year in a while that more money is being put into the aid formula. I would anticipate with Tony Evers as a governor that we'll probably see more years where the revenue limit will be used and the formula will be used. So I don't think it's a bad idea to transfer the 1.36. In fact, I think prioritizing the fund balance might be more important this year than it had been in the past.
Jim?
So if we did do the 1.5, the maximum, would we end up having to borrow money at some point to pay expenses before we get state aid on the next budget cycle?
That's the million-dollar question, literally. We don't think so, Jim, but a lot of that depends on how much the auditors tell us needs to be moved into the assigned fund balance. If it's more than the projection, it is possible that we could have to look at maybe a short-term line of credit. We want to look at short-term borrowing because there's 1 month. This next year is a little bit challenging because I think it was November, Leah, where there's going to be 3 payrolls. And when we look at the payment schedule from the state and everything, that could be a little tight, but we have not had any trouble over the last few years with cash flow. So I don't know that I would let that weigh heavily on this decision.
David?
I guess my motion would be for the 1.36 million contribution. I just think that we've had enough discussions in the past about fund balance, and depending on what the auditors do, I'd rather not put us in a position where we might be below the threshold on that.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none?
Well, we need a second. We need a second.
Oh, should I not get a second?
Did David make a motion?
Yes.
I second it.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Okay. So that's to approve the 1.
The 1.36. Chris has a question.
Chris?
I guess I'm just confused about how this was going to transpire. Would it make more sense, rather than making a motion that could curtail people voting for the other option that maybe they were leaning towards, that we just take a vote, up and down vote? who wants to vote for 1.56, who wants to vote for 1.36, to make it possible that we all get the voices included on the decision.
What does the board think? David?
I wasn't making another motion. My motion, I was just clarifying my original motion
Okay.
before, so.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Chris?
I'm not sure I understand what David was just clarifying. I'm being a simple man. So he made a motion that we approve the 1.36, which would then stop the discussion if other people wanted to maximize state aid at 1.56. And then I suggested if that's the case, that might be curtailing discussion or people's understanding of how they wanted to vote and shutting that possibility down. So I suggested that we take an up and down vote, show of hands, how people weighed in on the issue, rather than shutting down the possibility of having people vote their conscience.
Well, is that, Jim?
Well, we have a motion right now in a second, so we have to vote on it.
True that.
That's fine.
So if you wish the other one to go through, your statement would be to vote against it.
Check.
Dan?
To answer maybe Chris's question about discussing the other option, that's open for discussion right now, isn't it?
Would you want to discuss why you think that would be better?
After hearing Leah's feedback on the state we're in, that there probably wouldn't be too much movement on the accounting that we had, that we would be in good shape to make the full 1.56 million transfer, and that way we'd be entitled to as much aid as possible from the state, which was, what, $20,000? So I didn't see a compelling argument not to do that. I heard that there was a fund balance consideration, but I didn't hear any compelling reason as to why that was preferable to maximizing the amount of aid we would get from the state. I just heard that that would be a sensible and prudent thing to do without any explanation why that was the case.
I guess my reasoning behind it is, even if we don't spend the entire 1.56 million or budget transfers the entire 1.56 million, we're not going to lose the state aid for sure down the road. It's still possible to get state aid on that $200,000. Am I correct on that? So,
When it's spent, yes.
yep, when it is spent. So it's not, we would lose it possibly for this year. I guess I took the narrative to say that we're pretty sure the auditors are going to reclassify some of our Fund 73 health insurance money. Is that fairly certain?
It's really the fund balance based on the health insurance program. They're going to make sure that it gets assigned so that it's not spent for a different reason.
So that would be lost then as a portion of the fund balance.
The unassigned.
Unassigned. 536 million or 5.36 million? Let me get it right. 531,000, sorry. Little high. But, to be honest, I'm fine either way. I just think that we've had questions in the past about fund balance and whether or not we're maintaining a healthy fund balance. And if we're going to spend too much and put us in jeopardy of maintaining our policy of the fund balance, then I was taking the safe road, that's all.
Chris?
As I understood it from our first meeting that we had with Joe, is we never had a real problem with the fund balance. That we've been very fiscally responsible, and that's never been an issue. And I know that we've taken a very conservative approach to how we think about how we provide for unforeseen situations, but since that hasn't happened in recent years, it would seem like that would be undue caution to risk not getting a maximum amount of state aid by making the larger transfer.
Dan?
So I guess that I'm wondering if we go 1.3 or 1.56, whatever, what will be the difference in the fund balance? How much? What is our recommended or our rate that we expect to have according to our policy.
Leah, do you want to read the policy language? Otherwise, I have it right here.
I don't have it.
Okay, so the policy says this: the goal of the district to achieve and maintain an unassigned fund balance in the general fund equal to taxes receivable at year end plus 10% of budgeted expenditures for the next fiscal year. So about 9.35 million. And like Chris said, our district has had a history of having a fund balance where the policy goal suggests. However, last year, after the audit was completed, the auditor suggested because our health insurance fund has grown, that a portion of that fund balance be moved to an assigned fund balance so that it can only be used for the health insurance. So that decreased the unassigned fund balance quite a bit. So it really just comes down to whether the board wants to prioritize the policy and cash flow and potential bond rating and making sure that we end the year balanced or better. Then the board would want to have the lower transfer amount. You know, and we're not planning on borrowing anytime soon, but you know, bond rating, you know, things like that can really be affected based on your fund balance and how you end your year if you continue to end in the black or if you end up having years in the red. Now we'd be able to explain it. So again, kind of like I said to Jim about the cash flow, none of those reasons would be a primary reason to make the decision one way or another. But I would say that if the board is choosing to make the maximum fund balance transfer, then we may want to look at the policy in the future, because essentially the action of the board would be saying that the policy isn't the priority, it would be capturing the state aid. And the other piece to it, like I mentioned before, you know, if the board makes the maximum transfer but then decides that the fund balance policy is really appropriate and where we want the fund balance to be, it could be much more difficult in future years to add to the fund balance. One, you know, who knows if we're going to end in the black. We've had a good history of doing that, but we're adding a lot of staff and several of our staff members are getting advanced degrees. You know, it may be more difficult to end in the black in the future. And with the way the tax rate is, even if we don't make the maximum transfer, I still think we're going to have more state aid next year than what we had this year. That may not be the case in the future. So if prioritizing fund balance at a real healthy level is important, this may be the best time to do it, with the future being unknown.
Dan?
So I guess I'm wondering what effect would either decision be on our classrooms?
Well, either way, we're being very fiscally responsible. Whether the money is transferred into the post-employment fund or the retirement or the capital maintenance fund or in the fund balance. So either way, the board is being responsible and putting the district in a better financial position. In terms of a future classroom impact, it's really hard to say. I don't know if you can project that, you know, because we don't know what state aid is going to do in the future, and we don't know what the state might do with changing payments and such. I think the safest thing to do would be to grow the fund balance. And so that probably, I guess, would be a little bit better for the classroom than the other option. It's probably negligible.
So what you're saying is that there's going to be no effect on the classroom either way?
I'm saying that it's too hard to predict, but either way, I think we're making a good decision.
Like I said at our last meeting when we talked about this, I guess if we do want to do the higher amount, then as long as we're willing to look at a policy change on the fund balance, just to make sure we're within reason, but I'm fine either way. I just know that I can remember years on the board when I first got on that fund balance was a huge thing, you know, and we constantly were borrowing money to make payroll on that during the year. So, but like I said, I'm okay either way. I prefer the 1.36, but if the majority would rather do the other one, then we just have to look at our policy then down the road.
And I guess that's what Lee and I are saying, that if we make the maximum transfer, we want the board to be fully aware that, one, it is possible, I don't think it's likely, but it's possible that cash flow could be an issue, especially in November. And two, if the auditors move more than what we're anticipating, we could end up in a deficit spending situation for 2018, 2019. And that's okay. A lot of companies are, we have a fund balance and we can use it. It's not against the law or anything to deficit spend, but that will be on a record that we had a deficit spend, and we'll have to explain that someday if we ever look at a bond rating. So it's really just as long as there's full disclosure and the board makes an informed decision. I don't necessarily think that one is better than the other.
Trish, in an effort to help me understand this a little bit more, I'd be curious to know, like, if Clint or Penny or Heather had any information that would, do you have thoughts one way or the other?
Penny? I guess I'm more in favor of the 1.36 at this point. Keep the extra money. $20,000 in the whole scheme of our budget is kind of a drop in the bucket. I'd rather have the money in the fund balance or in, the funds that we can use it.
Anybody else?
I would be in agreement. I think both would be a good fiscal option. I think 1.36 puts us in a spot where we're not necessarily having to borrow short-term interest rates, that type of stuff. But I think we also employ someone who does a good job. I don't know what her recommendation between the two would be, because I'd be comfortable with either, but I lean towards 1.36.
Leah, do you have anything to add?
Heather, do you want to add anything?
Oh, I'm sorry, Amy.
I agree with.
Okay.
I guess I would agree as well. Seeing how it's unaudited at this point, if they were to expense more, it's possible we could be in a deficit situation, and I just hate to be in a deficit spend, is my thought. It is ultimately the board's decision, and either way, it wouldn't, we would be fine, but.
So, okay, any more discussion? Okay. Jamie, let's take the vote. Okay, looks like it passes 8-1. Thank you. Okay, I entertain a motion to approve the district administrator contract.
So,
Second.
David and Heather. Just to let people know, because there might be some confusion here, this actually was on a closed agenda back in April, and it was suggested by your attorney that we do it in open session. So we're just reaffirming our vote as to how it was the last time. I know it's a little bit difficult because Clint and Chris, you were not on the board at that time, but this is the way we need to go. So is there any discussion before we vote? David?
I just want to thank you and Joe for bringing this up in open meeting so we can clear the air on this issue and get this over.
Jim?
Well, obviously, before I was opposed to these changes in the contract. I don't think they're necessary. And so I'll definitely be voting against this. I could see voting for it if the language was changed back to what was originally approved by the board originally in open session, but not the changes that were made in closed session.
David?
I guess I'd just add, some of the language that was added, changed in the contract was, there were a lot of things that were happening at the time, things on social media against Joe, a lot of different things. And, I guess I just want to remind the board that our board, it's not just about Joe's contract. He has a family here as well. It's about supporting him and his wife and kids. It's about his lead team, the administrators in the room here as well, and across the district. I think as a board, we need to send a positive message to the community that we're behind Joe 100% and he deserves our support.
Penny?
I have to say that I'm a little disappointed that we're voting on this again. I guess my reading of Steve Weld's letter states that what we did was okay. And how many times do we vote on an issue? We already voted once, it was an 8-to-1 vote. Trust and moving forward seem to kind of be the theme that we're trying to work towards as a board, and so now I think that re-voting on this is muddying the waters a little bit. So if we're re-voting on this, what else do we need to bring up? What else do we need to re-vote on? I'm struggling with this a little bit.
Just to take off that a little bit, it's my concern would be, what if the vote would be different now?
Absolutely.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it is a transparency thing. I think that whether Steve Weld said it was right or wrong or indifferent, I just think that it's the right thing to do to vote in a public session on any contract that you're voting on. Penny?
But we had already said that, or had come to an agreement, I thought, as a board, where when we make a vote as a board, we stand behind that vote. And so now we're backtracking on that. We made a vote, we were moving forward. Now we're re-voting on something we voted on. I really am having a hard time with this. I don't think that it's right.
Okay. So hearing that, and hearing some from the other board members possibly, what is your pleasure? What would you like to do? Would you like to table this? Would you like to vote as a stand in closed session? I'm open to suggestions.
Well,
Penny?
I don't think tabling it is going to fix the issue. It's back on the table again now. I think we need to figure out how to deal with this and move forward. But I just don't want this to become the new norm, where we make a vote as a board and people aren't happy after the fact, and then we re-vote. That's just not okay with me.
Chris?
That's not really what happened. This was a procedural question, and Jim's brought this up a number of times. I mean, we all have complete confidence in Joe. This isn't about establishing confidence for him or for his family or for whatever. This is talking about how the procedure operates and what types of norms we want to have for addressing changes in this case, a very big contract, the biggest one we have in our district. And how we go about making those changes, and how we want to think about the process. That's incredibly important. So I know you guys are saying that Jim is attacking Joe's character, but that's not exactly what's going on here. There's a process that we need to follow, and there's a way in which we need to be accountable to the people that put us into our positions to make sure that we're operating in ways that create trust and that allow us to understand the process behind creating a contract. So if, Dave, you're saying that this is about a show of support for Joe, I mean, he's already got it. It's a huge contract. I mean, that's how we give him our support. We wouldn't give him that kind of salary if he didn't have our support. What Jim is talking about is the process that went down that day and the way in which we moved that to a closed session and how that took accountability and transparency out of the process. Am I reading your commentary right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
I'm sorry, I had my hand up
Okay.
first. I'm sorry, Jim, but
Yeah,
you know
go
what?
ahead.
I'm not talking about Joe. I don't care if it's Joe or anybody else. I'm talking about our procedures and our trust as a board. My point comes back to, we made a vote. We took a vote. We moved forward with that vote. Jim was opposed. The rest were in favor. That's fine. That was the time in which we should have had a conversation if everyone else was having a procedural question, issue, or concern. I am not happy with us backtracking an existing vote. And I don't care if we're voting for Joe or we're voting for a janitor. It doesn't matter. It's about the process that we chose as a board to take and we voted on. And now we're saying, never mind, let's change our minds a little bit. I'm not okay with it. No offense.
Jim?
so the procedural questions I brought, I mean, are a matter of law. And you can have procedures, you can do what you want, as long as you're not violating the law. Now, we had a letter from Steve Wild. I read it over, and I couldn't find anywhere in here that were actually addressed the concerns I raised. He talked about going into closed session and stuff, but, which we can do, obviously, but the way it was brought up in closed session clearly violated this guidance I got from the district attorney, or the attorney general, I'm sorry. And so that was why I think it is actually a good thing that we're re-voting on this, because now it's public. We're no longer afoul of the open meeting laws. If it passes, great. If it doesn't, well, then we're back to negotiation. But at least now it's a public record, and it really gets rid of the concerns that I brought up that were never really addressed.
David?
I guess getting back to the motion at hand, I think the reasons why I'm supporting it, Joe's done an outstanding job as a district administrator, and we just finished our 5th year in the black. As I stated earlier, there were some comments and some things said on social media by board members against Joe about his leaving the district and things of that nature. And so I don't have a problem with the stronger language that's in the contract. I think, in the book that we're reading, it talks about character and competence, two of the things, the keys to earning trust. And I think Joe has shown character and competence in his job here. And I think that we owe him the trust as a board to approve this contract and move on.
Chris?
Okay, and I agree, but this issue is about something slightly different. And if you read the end of Attorney Weld's letter, what he addresses is that there is a Wisconsin Supreme Court case that broadly approves of voting in closed session as the culmination of all deliberations. That's culmination of all deliberations. It does not mean you can go into closed session, have deliberations, and then vote on it. That means the deliberations have happened before you go into closed session. So that's the last pair. Do you agree with me on that one?
I do not agree.
Okay, but that's
with everything. It says that, but, so we're gonna, sorry.
You have your hand up, go ahead.
You're good. Okay, and then the second precedent that he cites is from a court of appeals that significantly muddies the idea that you can have votes in closed session at all. So either way you look at it, I think it's important that this has nothing to do with Joe, but has a lot to do with the way in which our board operates and how we operate. And by pushing this under the rug and not acknowledging that it seems clear that we have violated the ways in which procedures should operate, so it's got nothing to do with Joe. It's got to do with how we operate and what our level of competency is in terms of the way in which we make decisions. And I think there might have been some problems that happened in this one, but by acknowledging it head on, that the issue is with us and how we make decisions, I think that's really important for establishing credibility with the community.
Heather and then Trish.
So what I read with the culminating deliberation, so what I'm hearing you saying is anything that should happen in closed session should happen on the outside. So if a teacher is getting dismissed for something, that should be an open deliberation first and then in closed, because that's how I'm interpreting what you're saying, and I don't think that is right. But I also would like to just point that, as Clint pointed out, Clint and you were not here when this took place. So we had a closed session, we all voted as a board, we have policy that says we will vote as a board, as an individual, but we walk out and we support that decision. We voted, we had discussion in closed session, Jim brought it up, and then everything happened to what is in our policy. I'm with Penny that we're bringing something up now to re-vote again. And if that is gonna be the norm, then I'll start to bring other things up that happen with voting, if that's gonna be the case. I just think this is almost 4 months now that this has happened. And we're now talking about it. And it's a different board at the time. That's not fair. It's not equity. Trish?
So just to reaffirm, what Clint said, my concern also is that if we don't vote the same way with the contract, does Joe then have a legal standing to go back after the district because we didn't follow the procedures correctly? So I am very concerned. Not that he would, but I am concerned that that possibility might be out there.
Well, one thing I'd like to say is I am not willing to go back and hire a lawyer and use taxpayer money to try to iron this out, whether it's from Joe, whether it's from us, whatever. I just want to move on. I think we've got a positive outlook going forward. We're talking about trust, we're talking about, our board norms, they're working, and I just want to move forward. Okay, that's how I feel about the whole situation. So I would like to just say, let's vote, get over with, but if there's a concern that we already voted, then somebody can make that motion that we just keep that. That's all I can say.
And I'll make a motion to,
We have a motion on the floor.
Okay, the motion. So first we got to vote, but we have to, what do we have to do now? We have to vote. We have
well, David could,
I don't want to say much about this other than it feels very uncomfortable. But I do want the board to know that Amy, I thought, did a really good job after the last board meeting. She contacted me, we talked about how can we move forward, and by reaffirming the contract that's already been executed is the cleanest legal way for the district to move forward. Because frankly, I don't like the limbo of, everyone here trying to interpret the laws. I mean, we all, have a different interpretation of the laws. So the district attorney, gave his opinion, and I agree with Amy. I think just move forward one way or another, and it'd be nice to focus on kids.
Dan?
I don't think that we can change the vote, that we just have to vote in the affirmative to sustain what we voted. To do so would be to, again, throw the contract in limbo and cause lots of legal expenses that we just don't need. And I think that the changes that were made, while are significant, and I found somewhat unusual in the state, but I think that after doing some research, I think that we still can do what we need to do with that language if the time comes.
I actually had a conversation with Joe about that today. Okay, so we have a motion on the table. I guess if somebody wants to amend the motion, can that be done? Amend the motion to?
Let's just call the question.
Yeah.
Okay, then call the question and let's vote. Jane?
So what are we voting on?
Okay, we are voting on Joe's contract with the language as it is. Yeah, Mr. Williams. Yep. Motion carries. Thank you. Pretty much the same vote as before.
With 2 new board members.
The 2 new board members.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. All right, now, action to approve the exhibit board member norms and operating procedures. I entertain a motion.
so moved.
Heather, and Jim said. Any discussions? Hearing none. carries, thank you. Okay, now we're at the fun part of the meeting. I would invite the famous model schools people to come forward and do their presentation.
So what we'll do is we'll do the presentation first, and then Amy will present the commendations. So however you were planning on doing the presentation, Brian, go ahead and take it away, please.
So do not leave until after everybody's presented and I have a chance to give your recommendations to you.
All right, well, I'm going to start off by saying I'm very pleased that we have a large portion of our model schools delegation with us in the audience tonight who will be assisting with the presentation. Included in board docs is a very detailed summary of the sessions that everybody attended. We are not going to go through all of that, but people are happy to ask questions once we get to that portion. We did put together a brief slideshow. Jamie, oh, you can't slide it over? Okay. So you do have it in board docs as a PDF version. But what I want to do is just give a real brief overview. We do have some new board members since the last time we attended the Model Schools Conference a year ago. Essentially what Model Schools is it is a national conference with over 5,000 attendees. It's a conference that's grown considerably since its inception. The last few years, it has become one of the conferences that school districts across the nation tend to go to hear a wide range of information, best practices from what are identified as model schools and model districts to get ideas for looking to the future and planning for the future. And actually they use a term called future focused, which is Dr. Daggett uses the example of you plant to stake 5 years into the future, and where do you want to get to in that period of time, and then develop your plan from there, as opposed to just thinking about tomorrow or thinking about the next couple of weeks. So the work that we've done with the strategic plan is really aligned along that idea. As far as the way that the program is set up, again, like a lot of conferences, it has several keynote speakers laid throughout the whole day. I did include a couple of frameworks around rigor, relevance, and relationships. That is something we brought back last year, so I'm not going to go through all of that. But what was, I thought, really nice when we went to the conference this year, they've done some updates around social emotional learning and what that looks like, and several of our attendees attended sessions, myself included, around that. But then also another piece that helps bring some clarity to what we're doing is a list of what they've identified as 5 characteristics of the nation's most rapidly improving schools. The first 3 of them really focus around things that we have based our strategic plan around, and the work we're doing in our district, which is that we're future focused, student focused, and growth focused. So it's not just about an achievement target, it's about the growth towards that, it's about being focused on students and what's best for them. And then that allows you to get to rigorous and relevant instructional practices, and then coaching for your staff, be it internally or externally, and a commitment to PD. So with that, I do want to turn things over to our team so they can share some information with you. We're going to start with our elementary and work our way through. So if our elementary staff want to come forward, what I've asked them to do is identify one key takeaway that they saw at the conference, and a way in which they might see this being applied in the upcoming school year. So.
I want to thank the board. I'm Tricia Homestead, so 4th grade at Oakmont.
Sherry Schwartz, 1st grade at Matt Elementary.
And I am Shannon Branch from kindergarten at Wakanda. So right off the board, I want to say thank you for sending us. I actually got a lot of feedback from other districts in talking with people that they were really impressed at the number of teaching staff that we got to take. That there were many schools that just administration or superintendents and things were there, and they were really impressed. The teachers, and one principal that I had talked to had said how she wished she could have brought a few of her teaching staff because those are the ones that are gonna take it and use it in the classroom more so than them coming back and telling us, those wonderful things. So just that overall atmosphere of being there and getting that experience was wonderful, so I really appreciate the chance to go do that, so. One of the things that I really took away, I went to a lot of social emotional learning sessions, and chatting with Lori, we kind of talked that, some of those things are things we want to be working on. They go well with PBIS, those kinds of things. So I attended a lot of those sessions. And so one thing that I think, really working on that whole child, that until they trust you and that you can work with them, they're not really going to learn to their full potential. So really working on that whole child. One thing that I thought was really interesting, one of the keynote speakers, Linda Wayland, one of her sayings was, "So what, now what?" And she would say that to the kids when they would come across an obstacle or things like that. And so I thought, that's actually something that I can use as a professional too. So I have these students who are struggling with this. So what now? What am I going to do about it next? And where are we going to take it? So whether it's 5 years down the road or it's next week's lesson plans, those kinds of things. So how am I going to work on all of the children in my room?
I'd like to also thank the school board and the school district for funding this. It was very worth all of the money. We all are able to bring so much back to our classrooms because of it. It was really neat to have a chance to listen to such well-known speakers. There was a speaker named was Jennifer Cervello, who's just a huge name in literacy right now, and we've done lots of book studies with her. But to hear her in person and hear what she has to share and take that back to our classrooms was just really wonderful. And another big takeaway that I had was just with building relationships with kids, and you have to have those relationships before you can really affect that social and emotional learning with the kids, and not just our relationships with the students, but the staff relationships with other staff members also. So that was a big takeaway. And I felt really good after going to a lot of the sessions just with what we are already doing in our district. And I feel like we're really headed in the right direction, and that just reaffirms a lot of what we've been doing in the last many years. So.
Shannon, just before you start, could you just slide over to make sure the microphones get you a little bit? Thank you.
So I spent a majority of my time going to social emotional learning, also children of trauma, and then also looking at leadership opportunities. So the children of trauma, I think, will be very beneficial to take back to our buildings and back to our district. They talked a lot about teachers being the advocate for those children of trauma and how to look at their situation or their individual circumstances from a strength perspective rather than looking at those as deficits that are happening to the children. Also, as I'm pursuing my administrative degree, it was a great opportunity. One of the speakers I went to talked about being a leader from where you are. So being a leader as a teacher, and then it also gave me the opportunity to attend a session with Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Bagley, where I could learn from them. It was all about navigating sticky situations as an administrator. So it was a great opportunity for me to be right with them and hear their advice and seeing how to handle different circumstances. So it was great.
All right, so now we'll turn things over to our middle school representatives. So Claire Brown, our middle school STEM teacher, and Earl Haas, language arts.
Whoa. So much, now what? They said everything we're going to. I'm just going to share what I did over the weekend. The real good lunches we had in Washington, D.C.
Well, they didn't sing it though.
What's that?
They didn't sing though.
No, they did not.
Come on, Ralph, you can do it.
So, no, Claire and I were back there. Check, yep, they said that. You want to point that I am wearing matching sandals tonight? Which I did not for the trip to Washington, D.C. Security actually took them, because one had a bigger sole, so I think they thought I had a compartment in there. Seriously. And my fellow ladies here did not give me any crap about I took a lot of slack from one of the keynote speakers about wearing a buttoned-up, short-sleeve shirt. What's up, Dave? What's it about?
It's the end thing.
It was tweeted and everything. All right. So again, they thanked you. Really, it was an awesome conference. Picked up a lot of things. They've said a lot of it. So what? Know what? Shannon just touched on. We look at kids and we often look at what's wrong with you. Why aren't you performing? those deficits. And we really need to focus more on what you have to offer us. How can we help you with what you have and increase that and make you successful with the skills that you have? The other thing I want to say is a lot of mental health stuff, behavioral health. And what I took out of it, because I'm kind of a workaholic, is that I got to take care of myself first. Teachers got to take care of themselves. And whatever that needs to be, am I okay? If not, what do I need to do? And so we worry about the mental health of our students. We need to also worry about the mental health of our staff, ourselves, and our colleagues.
And some of my takeaways, one was from Bill Daggett again that said, do what's right for students, not what's comfortable for adults. So that was one that kind of hit home for me. Is you do what's right for the students, not what's comfortable for everybody in the building that's working there. We got to change ourselves to make accommodations for them. And then one of the sessions I went to was called Agents of Change. And it took a group of students, it was kind of an elective in theirs, that students then said, what do we need to change in the community, or what are some things that they wanted to change? And then the whole curriculum was kind of based off of how they can get that change. So they wanted to write a letter to the board or to somebody in power, so then you work about writing a business letter. How would that letter or how would that email focus? And that's one thing I want to take back for our win time, where we have where students can sign up. I thought that would be a really great course that I can take back right away and put it into motion and see what kind of things they're seeing that need to change in Menomonie. So that's something I want to take back right away.
One more thing. I did attend a couple writing pieces. Yeah, you can. And, I walked out of there. Sherry was at one of them with me. We're doing well here when it comes to writing. I walked out of there thinking, okay, this is going to sound a little egotistical, but I walked out of there thinking, wow, I didn't really learn anything, but it just confirmed that, hey, we're doing the right thing here. We're making progress, and we're rocking and rolling. So, again, thank you for the opportunity. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll turn things over to our high school representative. Yes,
And again, a lot was said already, and it was phenomenal. I used to say WISCO was my favorite professional development, which is the Wisconsin School Counselors Association. And we go down there, we present, we listen, we learn. This was phenomenal, not only the learning that happened from the professionals, but the group of professionals we had together and learning from each other, and just being together and being at this conference was amazing. Something, like Ralph said, we're doing so many great things here. Rochester presented, Rochester, Minnesota presented on their relationship with Mayo and what they're doing with SEL and student health and all these different things. And I was just like, wow, we do that. Oh my gosh, we do that, but we just don't have that. We have a relationship with Mayo, but we don't have specific people that are coordinating with the school in terms of what exactly we are doing. But through that, the connections we've made with Rochester and our HGH person, I don't recall her name, is it HG? Or HMH person, I don't recall her name, but lacrosse, but she's really excited to work on that, not only for our school, but all the schools she works with in the area, and how we can team up with Mayo schools, or with schools that have Mayos in their communities. So that was really exciting, and just to see that, and Dr. Daggett spoke about how great Rochester was, and to hear that, and then to go there and be like, wow, we are really on the right path here, and your support to get another counselor, and the community support to get another counselor to move forward in that and just build that support for our students, and hopefully our staff, and what we are doing to build those relationships, which what Wes says we have to get better at doing, or at explaining that and saying what that relationship is, what does that look like, instead of just saying we build positive relationships. Okay, great, what is that? What does that look like to our students? Also, thanks to Mr. Seguin for everything he did for saving seats for us, for setting up meetings. It was phenomenal, and just having a plan of what we did and coordinating all this. Thanks.
Juan's so personable that everyone knows him, but in case you don't, Juan Ramirez is one of our awesome school counselors at the high school. Mr. H, anything else to add?
Yeah, I do. And what I would add to this is not so much the takeaway from the model schools, but some of the research I've done post model schools, specifically in the trauma, in being a trauma-informed school district. And the session I went to where we have to move to being a trauma-skilled school, which means, okay, what are you actively doing more than just what you know about the SEL needs of our students? And in doing that, I read kind of a guideline from the National Dropout Prevention Center. Dr. Daggett actually wrote the foreword to this. And I'm just going to read a quote that resonated with me. It is likely that future litigation and legislation will focus on trauma incidents, the assignment of responsibility, and mandates for schools. I'm reading this is that it might be coming down the pipeline that we have to be trauma-skilled schools. And so being ahead of the game, I think, is very critical, but that doesn't mean that we can just say, okay, we're ahead of the game. I think we have to keep moving forward. And again, it was a privilege to represent the school, the community, and be able to go. And I thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to present?
Okay, Aaron and Susan. So we had two other administrators who joined on the trip this year, or three. Mark Anderson is not here this evening, but
You might be the remedial group, because
Yeah.
we got to go to second.
Yes.
Which was
Tier two.
awesome.
Tier two.
Tier two.
We're tier two,
We're tier
yeah.
It was a great opportunity for us. One, because we had our feet on the ground walking in, we knew what we were walking into, and it was great to lead a new group of staff when we went. One of the things I noticed last year and this year is how amazing it is to connect with staff you don't normally connect with every day. And even though both of us work year-round with staff from all over the district and have for years with summer programming, there were incredible opportunities to grow and connect and create bonds that we are going to carry on as the school year goes on. And so you can't put a price on that opportunity. I think it's been.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I also attended a lot of SEL, a lot of, ditto what everybody said. But one of the things they talked about was needing to be emotional detectives for our kids and, help figure them out again. Not what's wrong with them, but what can I do to help them, what's happened. And another session I went to talked about some basic emotional skills, and there's a developmental range. I'm excited to bring that back to my staff, kind of look at where can we focus at these developmental levels to help these kids.
And while we couldn't take a lot of our staff with us, we took a really nice group. We had the opportunity again to meet with some of those key speakers who were keynote speakers. We got to meet with them one-on-one in a room and have the opportunity to ask them some direct questions, which was amazing. And really had great opportunities to connect with them on a personal level. And then now we're going to be bringing and now bringing those back into the classroom. Really came away with some great opportunities for how we're going to move forward and educate our staff now. How are we going to give them the opportunities that we've had on this summer excursion, both in the classroom and in the district. So.
Thank you.
It seems like there's some board members that would like to ask some questions, so if that's okay with the team, we'll go. Tricia?
Well, I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say two things. I think it's awesome that Mr. Haas and Mr. Ramirez mentioned the fact that there are things going well. Yes, I mean, we all can acknowledge there are some things that we're, trying to work on, but it's okay to pat yourself on the back. I think it's good for your mental health to do that, and so I'm really excited about the fact that you guys get to go, because it's part of my second thing I was going to say is that thanks so much for posting on Twitter. I feel kind of like a stalker a little bit, but I love attending conferences myself. So I felt like I was, there with you guys. I'm like. I'm like, oh God, I am not a stalker, but I just wanted to thank you so much for doing that. I truly appreciate it.
Anybody else? Jim?
So, Mr. Hatsapopoulos, you actually, I was going to ask a question about this, the trauma skilled versus trauma informed, and like, what is that? Can you kind of dig into that a little bit? Like, if I walked into school, how I can tell if you were skilled and not informed?
Why don't you come forward to the microphone?
Sure. A lot of it will have to do with the steps involved with becoming more than just knowledgeable. So you understand that there are ACEs, or these traumas that students have. So what are the policies, what are the practices, what are the systems in place that then help? And it all comes down to identifying the brain development of the student. You have a writing assignment, yet that student is disconnected from it. Okay, so what individual steps have you identified with that individual student to help get them over that obstacle that they have? And it really comes down to almost every student in the school having a functionality of identifying the individual needs of students. That lies at the relationship piece, and is related to the relationship rigor, relevance rigor. Okay, and so if that relationship piece isn't there, from the teacher, the individual student, from the administrator to the teacher, the administrator to the student, to the school counselor with the student, with the administrator, with the teacher, with the intervention. It is core theory of kind of understanding how all this works. Okay, and so a trauma-skilled school has mechanisms in place to identify those relationships and action on them. And it's individual learning plans for almost every student where these traumas are there. And how that might look from one school to another, it fits. But there's specific steps and outlined by these organizations that Bill Daggett has supported. So that's something that I'm interested in growing my personal career. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Sorry, just to add on to that too, with the board and working with Tony and the other people services and looking at SEL and how we are doing that in our buildings, it was really interesting to me that one of Dr. Daggett's recommendations and just what everybody's saying is that, you need to be careful going into this and saying this is when SEL happens. SEL doesn't just happen 10 o'clock on Tuesdays once a week. We really have to look at how is it happening across our whole building. Not just during that specific time. And, so we have put a lot of time looking at what we're doing. We're doing a lot of great things, but again, just looking at the system of it and working with Casey and the administration and just seeing their vision too is going to be really exciting to see that. How we support trauma and pulling that all together.
Yeah, the clock doesn't end. Something like that.
Anybody else have any questions? Chris?
I'm so excited about, I read through all your reports. I could sense the excitement coming off the page. You just quoted my favorite quote. It doesn't happen on Tuesdays, at 10 a.m. It doesn't. And one of the things that I appreciate the most is that, when we're at this level of what we're doing, it's an act of dedication. What you guys are doing is an act of love. And that it impacted me so much. And so I really appreciate you guys coming in, sharing with us some of the stories that get me excited as an educator, why the hell we do this, and why you guys are so instrumental in terms of creating a culture where we really understand what student-focused learning looks like. It does not look like an action plan, though those are nice. It looks like voices from kind, caring professionals who can transform kids' experiences. And that's one of the things that came back in the feedback when we did outreach to our constituents was it didn't translate well into the assessment that came out of that. But our parents are so concerned with how their students experience, their kids experience learning. And just hearing you guys talk about that, that it's not what is learned, but how it's learned. That was another quote that popped off the page at me. I've got supreme confidence that this district is going in the right direction, if for no other reason than we're hiring good people. So thank you.
David?
My question is to Mr. Haas. Did you keep the other two shoes at home yet?
Well, I got home and realized that the other one was broken, and I'm not sure why I did it to it. Probably because I'm a teacher and I can't throw anything away.
And the second part is, what did your wife say when she found out?
You know what? I don't think I've told her.
It's on video tonight.
I think I did, 'cause I took a picture of it, just so, because you never know.
She probably just shook her head.
That's what I was gonna say.
She's been married to me for 28 years. She's, yeah.
I too read those reports and I was just ecstatic. I could feel the joy that you had and the excitement you had and the passion. I speak for myself. I want to know what I can do to sustain that and help you. Keep that feeling going and let everybody else capture that. So
I'm going to need every Friday off.
Classroom volunteers, who wants to come to the wood shop?
Nice try, Ralph, nice try.
It was a lot of fun keeping Rob.
Anybody else? Okay, I have some accommodations for all of you. And I just like to say that I read, like Dan, I read every word, was very enthused, and made me feel very happy to be the school board president of a school district that really cares and really helps their students learn and grow the way they need to grow. And so I appreciate that. I am not going to read every single one of you, but I am going to just tell you what you're getting your award for, okay? For your service and leadership at the building and district level as a member of the 2019 SDMA Model Schools delegation. SDMA Model Schools representatives participated in planning activities, attended the 2019 Model School Conference in Washington, D.C., and will assist with follow-up activities in alignment to the SDMA strategic plan at the building and district level. And before I pass out these things, I just want to say something. I noticed your picture in front of the Washington Monument on the mall. I want to know why there wasn't a picture, because I take students to Washington, D.C. In fact, I just took some 4 students back in May. I never saw a picture of you guys trying to do your picture with your finger up on top of the Maybe you did that but didn't want to share it. That's something that's real popular, is they try to get it just right so they have their finger. So it looks like they have their finger on the top.
Oh, we're going to have to go again.
There you go. There you go. Okay, Juan. And I think since Joe wants a picture, I think you have to
Stay up as a group.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Official wants to
stay up
take a
here. Brian? Claire? Is she here? I don't see Mark Anderson. Sharon Schwartz? Susan Mumson? Sarah Place?
She's not.
She's here. Yeah, it's summertime, probably on vacation. Mary Begley? Ralph and his matching flip-flops? Tricia Homestead? Shannon Branch? And I hope I get this right, Michael Hasapopoulos? I've been practicing. Jonathan Stragey?
Not here.
Carrie Davis, I know she's not here. Chris Kiles?
Not here.
Not here. And that's it. So thank all of you for cool stuff that's happened this year.
Okay, this is good digital citizenship. If anybody doesn't want to be on Twitter, now's the time. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Thank you. Nice job, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, Ralph, I'll see your wife tomorrow, let her know.
I'm going to show the picture when I get home now.
I'll see her tomorrow morning, so make sure you tell her it's nice.
Nice shirt.
I'll get those out. Together, talk to you soon.
I don't know about all of you, but that's what school teachers are all about.
Joseph's second year, I'm listening.
School board, that's great. Okay, moving right along. Under discussion, item B, additions to the 2019-20 staffing plan and budget.
So we've known for a while now that the budget's approved and we're anticipating $213,000 of additional revenue for the 2019-2020 school year. I emailed the entire staff, all of our teachers, administrators, excuse me, everyone. And the ideas that we received back and discussed with the district directors, a few things. First of all, additional intervention support, especially at Downsville and Knapp. We feel like we have a great opportunity to really have an impact on our students, and it also makes sense from a business standpoint because our current arrangements are going to require travel and some resources that could be utilized in a better way. So we're not asking for any action tonight, but I am asking the board to provide your feedback because we would like to post for a position. We still think there are very qualified people out there. We may even have some internal interest, and we would like to go ahead and hire an interventionist to work with the combination of Knapp and Downsville. It may end up being one full-time interventionist in Knapp, one full-time in Downsville, eliminate that travel. The other ideas that we've talked about in the staffing plan, in the next year that we are working towards, the addition of elementary science Olympiad coaches. I also received an email about that from one of our teachers suggesting that that could have a very good impact on our elementary schools. It's not very expensive. That is something else that we would like to plan for as we move into the school year. We would be working with existing staff in most cases to fill those positions. Another idea from a teacher was to add a teaching budget for each classroom. And if we look at about $100 per teacher, the total cost of that would be approximately $25,000. I do think that that's a really good idea. I think our teachers know exactly what could benefit our students. I would caution us to, if we do this, not to necessarily commit that it be a recurring situation. I would like it to be, however, not knowing how the state budget's going to be and what the district budget's going to be, I think we should really make sure we focus on that being a 2019-2020 initiative, but I think it's a really good idea. And that's something that, with board support, that's something we could add to our budget and get going right from the start of the school year so that our teachers can maximize any impact that that idea would have. And then the other piece would be to increase site budgets. I think we would want to see what our enrollment is. We want to see, excuse me, my voice is really bad. We would want to see what the overall budget ends up being after the annual meeting and the October 8th certification, the September pupil count. So that one I don't think we would suggest actually taking any action on until the board finalizes the budget in October. But I think providing our principals the opportunity to work with their building staffs and to have an ongoing impact, those would be the other recommendations. So at this point, what I'd really like to hear is the board's input on that, any other ideas that the board members would like considered, and then really some direction in terms of that interventionist.
I just was going to say in regards to the increase in classroom budgets, the $100 per teacher, I could see, and maybe Heather has some thoughts about this too, that just taking some pressure off of school PTOs,
right,
which would help. So I really like that idea. And I totally agree that maybe, not promise it long term, but if we can, everything else.
Well, and again, the total cost is about $25,000, so it would be nice if we could, have that be a long-term solution. But I just think it would be wise of the board to focus on one budget year at a time when it comes to that.
Jim.
I'm Jim. So one of the other three things was more time on at the environmental site for the whatever coordinator, whatever you call it. So I would like to see that if we could do it.
And I figured, Jim, that you'd be asking about that, and that's also something that we've talked about. And I would like to see us develop our environmental education curriculum across the board. The challenge with adding that at this point of the year is that we already have it in our staffing plan where there's a shared option. I agree that, and we've talked about this before, that I don't know that that's the best option, but we do have a person who's already under contract and we have a plan moving forward. I think to try to implement that in the 2019-2020 school year would be really challenging. So when we talked about it as a team, we didn't feel like that was the best option for this year. However, knowing that the budget's a 2-year budget, when we start looking at the staffing plan for 2021, then I really think that that's, getting to that next level is where that could fit.
Yes, Joe. I happened to walk my dog out there last week, and it's looking great.
Really?
The guy that's working out there is doing a heck of a job. Yeah.
Art Case, head custodian at
Yeah,
Oklahoma.
absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's looking good.
Thanks for saying that.
David?
As far as the interventions between Knapp and Downsville, I guess I'd like to see if they can keep them in the building rather than travel back and forth.
That would be our goal. It also has some benefits for the, those, and I've been in real small rural schools before. There's so many auxiliary benefits of having someone there full-time to get to know the kids and the families, and that would be our goal, Dave.
Heather?
I also like the interventionists at every school, or at both schools, the increased budgets. The other thing I was looking at was, or would like to just kind of consider is the administrative assistants for the elementary schools, the days added for them to help get the school year going. And
that is something that we looked at, and we're going to talk with the lead team more about tomorrow. I think more study needs to be done on that, Heather, but it's something that's still definitely on the table. Thank you.
Chris?
I like the idea of adding interventionists, especially at our smaller rural schools. But I'm a little concerned that, especially after the number of students we have teachers come, we have the entire mental health staff come here to say that they could really use any help we could give them. Maybe a reason why I was really thinking we should go for getting that extra $20,000 so that we can make sure that we're getting PD for our staff. And I think Mr. Hassapopoulos raised a very critical question of how we turn from a trauma-informed school system to a trauma-skilled school system, and getting training for our staff so that they can help mediate that, especially given the impact that the culture of the classroom has on being the primary responders for those kids and identifying. I think Mr. Hassapopoulos also pointed out that they have to be on the forefront of creating personalized plans that are responding to their emotional intelligence, which was a higher indication of their long-term success in life than their IQ. So I would be incredibly sad if we didn't use this opportunity to start thinking about how we can really improve the saturation of structures that take care of our students' mental health.
So what is it you're suggesting, Chris?
Had PD definitely for teachers, so that we can build the skills in the classroom that can help them perform the personal interactions they have with the students to make plans for them. I would also be open to thinking about adding, perhaps a counselor. But what I like about professional development is that goes with those teachers for the rest of their careers.
Right.
That's something that adds value now. It adds value 5 years from now. It adds value 10 years from now. Because as new teachers come in, they're in a network of individuals who make SEL and trauma first classrooms a real priority. And it builds a culture, which is what all of those model schools were about. Right. I mean, we talk a lot about structure on the school board, but I don't know if you looked at the feedback that came back from the students. It's about building a culture of what goes on primarily in the classroom and then saturates those schools.
I think where the confusion is that we we've added a ton for next year. We've added more staffing with school counselors. Almost all of our designated district professional development is going to be on SEL. We have 3 different keynote speakers coming in and 1 coming in twice. I guess my point is I think there's a capacity level, and while I think SEL is critical, I think we're doing an awful lot. So I guess I'm just, like, any specific PD, like, are you looking at a conference, or, I guess I'm not sure what you're asking for.
Okay, there's no confusion on my part whatsoever. We actually had our entire mental health staff come here and say that they can take any resources that we can give them. They said, please give it to us. Now, I'm not one of those people, but I would certainly make sure that we try and carve out some of these funds to put in the hands of people who can make good decisions about that. So I personally like the idea of professional development for teachers to help them build the skills that aren't just about responsibility. Just, I see you're shaking your head, and that's a little bit disrespectful. So I'm not suggesting that there's not an effort already underway to start taking care of mental health within our schools. But as our people come back from attending model schools conferences, and it suggests that we're going in the right direction, there's nothing wrong with putting the resources in the hands of people who are making that happen in our schools and moving along that direction. So for me, it's a little disconcerting to have parents, to have teachers, to have students, and then have our staff come and ask for more resources. And then when we have more resources, that we don't think that maybe part of those resources should put in their hands to help promote the initiatives that we have already going.
The confusion that I have is I'm not sure what you're asking for. I agree 100% that we need to continue to do more with SEL. But you clarified a little bit there, so it sounds to me like you're suggesting that we carve out a piece of the budget and say that there are SEL funds that can be utilized. Is it that my confusion? What are you asking for? That's why I'm shaking my head. I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying.
Then that's I'm just going to interject here, and David, you may say the same thing I was going to say. I don't know. But Chris, I don't know if you were on. I can't remember when we voted for the staffing change, but we are next year. We will have another middle school counselor at the high school. We will have another high school counselor. We also have an intervention social worker for the elementary. Okay, so those things are already, happening. Okay, now if they need more resources after that, maybe next year we can take a look at that. But I just want you to know that there are some resources. Also, the professional development. I know Dan and I have already talked about this, but they're bringing in a person who Dan and I saw at a WASP convention who is fantastic about, the trauma brain. And so there's a lot in place. And I'm not trying to put you down or say that, that we're not doing what you asked for. I'm just telling you that it is happening, and they're right. We are moving forward. So, so keep that in mind, because maybe next year we'll need more, and we'll have more money to deal with. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Do you want me to respond to that?
Yes.
I understand that we are moving in the right direction, but I also understand that the staff came and asked for more resources. So what I'm suggesting is that we ask them what kind of resources that they think that they need, rather than putting out a smattering of ideas that are interesting. It does seem that when we look at the feedback that came from our survey, that our parents are very concerned about mental health issues in the schools. It seems that from the feedback we got from students that they also are concerned about mental health issues. And then this is one of the things happened when we got that faulty analysis from, what was the name of that company we hired?
Faulty analysis?
Yeah, we talked about this before, about how they coded the feedback that was.
What are you talking about, a strategic planning company?
One of the most important items of feedback that came from the teachers was that they wanted more professional development. So, not knowing exactly what the primary needs are for mental health services in our schools, I do know that we've gotten feedback from teachers and from parents that they're very concerned about that. But putting that into conjunction with the feedback we got from teachers saying that they wanted more professional development, that if we have money to give them professional development, this would be a great opportunity to give them professional development in mental health. And I think Tricia brought this up before, that having teachers do Individual training is kind of expensive. And it's different than going to, let's say, to a speaker give a presentation on mental health in the classroom. But individual training for teachers was what one teacher asked for. And that a lot of feedback came back from the analysis from Studer that teachers wanted more professional development. So just categorizing that. I don't see anything here for professional development, and that's what teachers were asking for in the analysis, or the survey that came back from Studer. I noticed that our mental health professionals asked for more help. And one way that I would suggest that we try to use the money that we have is to put training into professional development and into caring for mental health of our students in the classrooms by giving teachers PD training in mental health. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. Thanks, well taken. David?
I think that the changes that we are making for the next school year are based off of feedback from staff and through our strategic planning that was done. That's why the 3 positions were added. That's why we're doing a ton of professional development around mental health and things of that nature. So I think the district is on track with what they need to do, and I don't see a problem.
You know, and maybe just, you know, for one thing, we might maybe just try to ask those professionals if they, you know, if they said that, please give us, you know, resources. You know, maybe it's good to ask them. Get a survey.
Yeah, and I did.
I give it to them, but maybe at least we can find out what they want.
Right, and I emailed the entire staff asking, you know, for ideas, and I, you know, share what we had. We also do have the mental health grant for next year. That's not staff training, but we do also have the school safety grant, which is going to provide adolescent mental health training. And I think maybe, Chris, we should go back to that report we just had and look at all the different trainings that we've had, because I am a little bit concerned about the capacity of our staff. And I'm a little bit worried that we're getting so heavy on social emotional learning in our professional development that, you know, there's a lot that our staff need to continue to stay up to speed with. I think it's critically important, and I think we need to continue to do that. But I also think we should engage our staff in terms of capacity and find out, you know, beyond just what you were talking about, and see what else the staff thinks is important.
Sounds good.
But again, I just want to reiterate, the confusion was my understanding of what you were trying to request, and that's why I shook my head, because I wasn't disagreeing with you. I didn't know what you were asking. And I think you've clarified it a little bit, but I still am not sure if you're asking that we budget for professional development, or we add more staff, or we set aside a budget figure. I'm still not sure what it is that you're suggesting.
Okay, this is the first time we've discussed this as what are some ideas. So I'm not asking for anything specific in terms of, I believe we should allocate $83,000 to position A. I'm just suggesting that if we have $213,000 or however much it is, that if we have this money, that we want to put some of that money towards an investment into PD training for staff and for teachers, so they can deal with some of the mental health issues that we have in our schools. One just idea, but in general, I would be disappointed if we didn't allocate some of that money towards what appears to be a growing need for mental health resources in our schools, maybe more so than the environmental side.
Okay. And I will say that, I think part of the idea of increasing the site budgets, that provides the principals a great opportunity to have some resources to work with their staffs and identify whether it be, and very well could be SEL, mental health, it definitely could be something like that, but that's where the real conversations can be had at the building level, and I think that would be a great opportunity. So thank you.
Clint.
Not to belabor this conversation any longer, but Joe, was this the comprehensive list that was put out? You emailed all staff, and this is the feedback you got back?
Yes.
Was there any feedback or any comments asking for more support for SEL or mental health that are not included in this commentary?
No.
Okay.
I mean, Tony and I have continued to talk about the people services budget and the SEL budget, but that's part of the annual budget.
So is this a comprehensive list of what came back?
Yes.
Okay.
When did you send that out?
in the last 2 weeks ago when we had the weekly update to the entire staff.
I'm just wondering if maybe it's summertime and people, not to say that you have to present it, but that may be part of the reason maybe you're not getting all of those.
Absolutely, yeah, yep, it definitely could have something to do with it. But again, I think, you know, other than the interventionist and the science Olympiad coaches, there's a lot of flexibility with the other ideas, and the decision doesn't need to be made on those yet.
Yeah, this is all discussion right now.
Right, and the feedback's helpful.
Okay, Chris, one last time.
Okay, am I missing the comprehensive list? Because I only see these 3 things. The addition of elementary science Olympiad coaches, increase in classroom budgets of $100, increase to site budgets. So you're saying that's the comprehensive list of the responses you got back from the entire staff? Those 3 things?
And the interventionist.
That's all they asked for?
Yep.
How many people do we have in staff? 200?
Oh, 300.
300?
It was
Came back with just those 4 suggestions. Those must be good suggestions.
Okay, moving right along. This one, I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about. Actually, Tricia and I got this email request from a board member, maybe who's the board president in Wausau. And she said it to all, to the Dear Menomonie Area Board of Education, but it only came to Tricia and I, which is why I want everybody to see it so that, you know, you can see what we're talking about. But my thinking is that she sent it because I'm the president and Tricia's the vice president, and that's probably where she got the information from. I mean, I speculate, I have no idea. But anyhow, I thought it was important just to bring this forward, to see what you guys, or you people, I shouldn't say guys, all of you ladies and gentlemen, think about this situation. She is asking for us to sign on to a resolution about banning all, or getting rid of all Native American logos and mascots and so forth. As you well know, we've had an issue in Menomonie, but the board anonymously changed it, so we now are the Mustangs. And so this is just something, I'm sure the resolution is going to go forward whether we sign on or not, but I just thought it would be given an opportunity for you guys to decide if you want to sign on or not as a board. And I want the whole board. I'm not going to do it unless the whole board does it, because I don't want the whole board to be represented by just a few people. So, okay. Jim.
I think it's a great idea. I read it over. We have to change a little language. Just talked about the Wausau School District. Probably personalize it to make it the Menomonie School District. Keep most of the language the same, but you know, this is something that's been going on for quite a while, and it's just basically common sense now.
David?
Yes. To be honest, I'm not in favor of it. We've had a long history here in Menomonie, and going back to when the Indian logo was removed and school board election, recall elections, and a lot of controversy here in Menomonie about it. And I guess, you know, we made the decision to go with the Mustang instead of the Indian logo, and I think that something like this should be left up to each individual school in their district to deal with how they want to deal with it. Some of them, you know, depending upon the area of the state, may have more affinity to Indian culture and heritage than others, and might have a reason for keeping it. I don't think that we should be in a position of saying, you know, that it's right for you or not right for you or whatever. I think it's a that we should still do.
Heather?
I agree. As much as you know, to me when I read this, there's some gray areas. For example, I am a race like warrior. I graduated as a warrior. But do you take that as Native American? Do you not? I think it should be left up to each school district. I actually spoke with a person tonight who is Native American and asked him his opinion on this. He says if the district is using it as a symbol for their heritage or their culture with the community, it's fine. Where it gets hairy is when people are doing just inappropriate things in relation to the Native American. But I look at this and think, where do you draw the line? I mean, is it Warrior, is it Arrow, you know, where, if you have a name like that, where do you draw that line? And that's where I think we need to kind of, in a sense, stay out of it as a district. And I think it should be left up to each district because of maybe their location or their culture, like David said.
Okay. I have to agree with these guys. It's not our business. We did what was right for Menomonie. We did what was right for us. I don't think we need to be dictating other districts and what they do, quite honestly. My maiden name is Brave, and my mom used to have a license plate that said Brave, and the Western Tech College that she worked for made her change her license plate because it was offensive to Native Americans. It's my last name. I mean, so who are we to go around and say what you can and can't have? We made the right decision for us. It was contentious at the time. I say we stay out of it.
Jim?
No, it's not a local issue, it's not a local decision. Because it affects people outside of your community. When your sports team goes and plays a different school, and you have an Indian logo that's offensive to the people in that community, you're affecting that community. This is a wide thing, this is a nationwide thing. You can't just like compartmentalize stuff when it's discrimination, when it's degrading, whatever. You can't do that. But that's why they're looking for a statewide legislation. That's why we've had statewide legislation. There are national efforts to do things like this. I mean, to get rid of the Redskins, the Indians, they're getting rid of Chief Wahoo. I mean, this is a national movement, and for us to be out of step with a national movement to get rid of these logos, and we have an opportunity to do something positive for our students that are minorities, that are Native American, and it's not even just the Native American. I mean, if you have other minority students and you're taking a stand in this, you're also telling your other minority students that they're important. So to pass on this and claim, well, it's a local issue is just absolutely wrong.
Heather?
What I said though is it doesn't just go to logos. I agree with you, the logos, but in here it says mascots, symbols, images, logos, and nicknames. Again, I am alumni of Rice Lake Warriors. We are a star. We have nothing to do, we changed our chief head to a star. But, so then what you're telling me then is if this goes to resolution and we adopt it, they now can no longer become the Rice Lake Warriors, which could mean something else, not Native American aspect. But I agree with the logos, but this to me is too many gray areas. Again, Brave, Arrow, that could all be to something. And like I said, I spoke with someone who is a Native American, and I agree, there's both sides to everything. You're not gonna please everybody, and I think that we need to stay out of it as a district and focus on what is important in Menomonie as a district and helping the students. And
Well, I spent all weekend with a good friend of mine who's Native, and he would support this 100%.
see, I mean, that's what I'm just saying. You've got some that do and I have some that don't support. So again, it's, who do you support? I mean.
And if you look at the bottom, there's a whole bunch of resolutions at the bottom and links, different Native organizations, tribes and stuff that are in favor of this, so.
To me, there's too much gray. Where do you draw the line?
Okay. Just for the record, my stepfather was Native, so I'm definitely in support of this.
Okay, well, Chris?
Okay, so let me get this straight. Unless it's a 9-0 vote, you're not going to allow this resolution to be put forward, is that correct?
Well, the way I look at it is if all 9 board members agreed, yes, I would send it forward. But I also don't want the problem of these 3 board members who have decided that it's not the right thing to do at this time. I don't want them to be signing on from a whole board if they don't agree with it. You see what I'm saying? Yes, Chris?
I'm not sure why we would make an exception to the way we do board policy development for this one particular instance.
This isn't board policy though. This is to recommend a resolution to legislative for WASB.
Any other board members have any idea? Any advice?
I will say that the board has a delegate that goes to the WASB Delegate Assembly in the school board convention in January. And, you know, certainly the delegate can take the input that was discussed tonight and, you know, cast a vote at the delegate assembly. I'm not suggesting one way or another, I'm just saying, even if the board doesn't want to formally support or co-sign a resolution, there still is an opportunity for the board to be involved with this if that's an avenue the board would like to take. But that's up to the board.
Chris?
I'm asking a slightly different question. It kind of goes to the procedure and how we go about doing business. Why are we making an exception to that we normally pass?
What do you mean, like
Any
the majority
motion?
vote, you mean?
Yeah, just a vote. If it's like 5-4 or 6-3, why is this time something that has to be a unanimous decision before we put forth a resolution? That doesn't make sense to me. We don't have to like do that with anything else. So it'd have to be a very compelling argument as to why we would suddenly change precedent. And this comes up and has problems later, like we found out earlier today at our meeting. Sometimes we just do things that don't, correlate with how we do things. And then that causes problems then down the road, like, oh, we should have an exceptional vote this time, or that's a problem.
Okay, gotcha. David?
Typically, if it's a resolution, I know we talked about this one other time, years ago, about doing a resolution, and all 9 board members would sign or endorse the resolution. And so in this case, you wouldn't have all 9 board members, you'd have the ones that did endorse it, you would have around there. So it'd be a board, instead of a board of 9, you'd have whatever the prevailing members were.
That's a good way to look at it. So if there's no argument, would it be the decision of the board to allow the board members that are for it to sign on, and the ones who don't? And it wouldn't say the whole Menomonie board, it would just say these Menomonie board members would sign on. Also, the other thing that's going to happen, as Joe said, there is going to be a delegate, but also we will have a chance to vote on all of the resolutions that are made by all of the school boards in the district. And that will be probably in, I'm not sure, September or something like that. And then we get to vote on, or September is to do the resolutions, and then right before the delegation, then we all get a chance to discuss the resolutions of all of the boards that have done them and decide what we want our delegate to do. So, David?
Just to clarify, my point wasn't to that so that you could send the resolution out that way, but that's why we have historically sent something out that way, is because it didn't include all 9 board members.
And that's why, that's my thinking as well. And I can understand Chris's point that, he doesn't think, we should get majority vote and stick with it, but this is kind of a touchy situation, personally. Heather?
I guess I would like to know a little bit more, like what other resolutions have come to the board and how have those been handled in the past? I mean, what have been past precedents that have occurred with resolutions that have come to the board?
David, you can probably speak to that.
One had to do with taxation and supporting the schools. And there was a issue brought before the school board to encourage, at that time, Governor Walker to support more dollars for education through taxation, something to that effect. And with the amount of property taxes that our firemen paid and stuff, I was not in support of that resolution. And so that's one that I remember that came through.
And so we didn't send it, correct?
We did not send it.
I think I remember some others. Clint?
But I have a question procedurally, how did you handle that, Dave? Did that get brought to the entire board for a discussion like this, or?
David?
It was brought up the same as this, and the board president, I don't remember if it was Colleen, at the time, had the same position as what Amy has now. If we did not have full support of the board, it was not going to be sent.
Dan?
I'm wondering, this is just being put forth by Wausau, and they're asking...
And they're asking other school boards as well. They've asked Black River Falls.
So they'll be sending this resolution to WASB, and then WASB will probably want to put it in legal terms or modify it to make it appropriate for WASB's position. So we're not voting basically on the wording, we're just voting on the concept. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, that's a good point. Is that changing anybody's mind?
I have an issue, I still have, I know I'm talking online, but I still have an issue with the wording in it. I like the concept, but how do you determine what mascot symbols, images, logos, and nicknames are? I guess this is where I become detail-oriented and tell me what constitutes to be Native American or offensive to any culture. That's where I then draw the line of, where do you determine that?
In my mind, it's everything that would be native that is a mascot. That's my mind, that's my opinion.
But I also, look at pennies and grape and, I mean, it's like, holy buckets. I mean, I never even thought about that, but.
I got one. How about the haymakers,
Well, yeah, as a farmer.
Yeah. I just think that we have enough already of people telling other people how to live their lives, and I don't think we need to be a part of it. It's a local decision, I still maintain that, and the school district has to do what's in their best interest for the community and for their stakeholders and students.
So I'm going to ask the question again. Do I send a letter signing on to resolution for the board members that agree, or do I not send anything at all? That's what I'd like to know. Yeah.
I would like to see a letter sent. I don't believe in bigotry, and this is fighting it, and if you're against it, you're for it. I mean, you're for perpetuating bigotry.
Wow. Trust.
Sorry. I say we don't send a letter.
Not send a letter. Okay. Then, we've got some time on this, so it's not really up for vote, it's a discussion item. So I think maybe we should put our thinking caps on and think about it, and then we'll bring it back for next time, and then we'll vote whether we're going to send a letter or not, period. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, Chris?
All right, one question.
Yes.
What if we don't have to send a letter as they worded it. What if we just pick two things that are clearly, like, things that we as a school board say we don't want to promote this in schools. So let's just say we just did like mascots and nicknames. I think we can all agree that it's in the best interest of education and kids' experience within the culture of our schools that we should not use Native American mascots and nicknames.
I would
We
say
agree on that
logos.
one?
I would say logos
You
is
would
more.
throw logos in there too?
Because I still see chief heads. I still see the Native American chief head. So again, nicknames I look at and think warrior. I mean, to me, warrior could be stand for different things. But we were known for the chief heads, the Indian chief heads, Native American chief heads back in the day, but we changed it and now we're a star, but we're still a warrior. So how would you interpret that then? I mean, or an arrow. So I would be okay with maybe mascots and logos, but not everything.
Okay, I think we've kind of discussed this to death, and so we're going to move on. And then next time, we'll bring it back for a vote, whether we send a letter or not. Thank you for the good discussion. Okay, next is new website for subscribing to board meetings, agenda postings. Joe, that's for you.
So one of the ideas that the board had was increasing transparency in the school district. We had discussion about minutes and agendas and posting them, and we thought about it and actually had a great idea after the board meeting in June from one of our community members was, why don't we just set up a website where people can self-subscribe? Because we manage so many databases in the school district. So Katie, I appreciated her and her team. They looked into it a little bit. And we now have a web page on our website where someone can go, and just like they do subscribing to the high school newsletter or the middle school newsletter. So as soon as the agenda comes out, Jamie's going to load the agenda on that website, and then as soon as the minutes are approved, she'll load those minutes on the website, and if someone subscribes, they're automatically emailed. So that long discussion that we had back in June, we actually had a great idea from our community, and now we have a website that's all set up for that.
David?
I think this is a great example of, setting, not telling you what to do, but telling you what we want type of deal, and letting the administrator and the administrative team I signed up already, so
I would
it's working.
How are you advertising this to people so they know to sign up?
Well, I wanted to wait until we told the board about it tonight,
Okay.
and then we'll be sending out a Sky Alert. I'll be doing the school crossings. And again, we're continuing to work on, developing transparency ideas. We're looking at a back-to-school newsletter. That will include items about our strategic plan, and this would also be a great item to have in there, because that'll actually get mailed out to every household and business. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you very much for doing that. That's great. And just on that same subject, I was very impressed with all the consent agenda items were put in the public site. So all of our residents, if they wanted to, could see the board norms. All of our residents could see the model school conference report. So I think that is awesome. I think that helps our community know exactly what we're looking at, what we're doing. And again, trust and transparency. Okay. Moving right along. Just for informational, review extracurricular staff contract requests.
There's nothing in there for this meeting.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, and then meetings for the next, we'll have a meeting on the 12th of August will be our next meeting at 5:30. And then there's some other things on in the public content about what's on the calendar for coming up, like the new teacher luncheon, and it's always fun to go to if you're able to go. And some other things. Okay. All right.
If you don't mind, Amy, before we get to the book study, I'm going to go ahead and excuse the administrative team. Thank you all for your time tonight. I know you have families to get back home to and such. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to have Joe keep the time, and we're going to spend 15 minutes. And I'm going to let him keep the time. He says he's going to let us do the talking and whatever. He's going to listen, and he's going to just do 15 minutes. And if we're done at 15 minutes and we've said all we can, and before, we'll dismiss. If it gets to 15 minutes and we're still in the conversation and we still want to be here, we'll go on. 15 minutes is what I'm going to allow. Okay, the way I think that this needs to be done, do we take a break? You're okay? Okay.
15 minutes. Okay, I guess we'll leave.
Okay, 5-minute break.
Heather says I'm sitting here. Never mind, let's just go.
Okay, Penny, go.
The moment there is suspicion about a person's motives, everything he does becomes tainted.
That was my whole.
That was mine too. That's what I started.
You guys saw like the teachers today when they were taking each other.
The other one was character and competence are vital to trust.
That was all mine.
I'm going to the bathroom. Next time you need one per person.
Okay. Heather?
Well, she stole mine.
Okay, well, that's good. That shows me that we're kind of on the same page.
And I read.
So very good. So we are the same. Okay, David?
Actually, I brought up the character and competence one early in the board meeting.
Yeah. I already had it in mind, so don't even.
I got it. But I thought that was really neat perspective. The other one, I like the story of the 7-year-old Stephen mowing lawn and
cleaning the lawn.
Yeah, cleaning green.
Getting it green.
Yeah, cleaning green. Yeah.
So cleaning green, and the process that he went through and all that. So I think a lot of it was my own kids, and with the farm, we always got chores and a ton of work to do and things like that. And kids, they have expectations of what they need to do and stuff like that. So it reminded me a lot of with my family how things are done and why we do what we do.
Trish?
So I'll just say one thing. It says that we judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their behavior. I think that's really true. But I wanted to just share this with you guys because I thought this was interesting. No, but so I'm telling my husband about this book, and he starts laughing, and he goes and gets the same book, and he has all this other stuff because apparently he went through an 8-hour training last weekend. So,
oh, no kidding.
But So I don't know, I haven't really looked at this stuff, but I wanted to share this stuff with you guys because there's these, they're called Speed of Trust, Trust Action Cards. And so they have the 13, they're called, I want to make sure I'm saying it right, 13 action cards. So like the first one is like talk straight. Second is demonstrate respect, create transparency. And then there's these other cards. So let's say, for instance, you are, wait, where did the card go? See, I've been looking at them, so they're all over the place. Let's say you're having an issue with, I'm feeling overwhelmed at work. So 13 behavior trust action cards. You can look at number 3. And number 3 is about creating transparency and what to say. You can look at number 8.
How does that create less stress at work?
Well, confront reality, so it tells you what to say, what not to say. So anyway, I thought these cards were really interesting. The book, to be honest, I read through it and I was like, okay, yeah, I agree. But then I was like, tell me what to do to make a difference. And
Well,
then
then
you have the cards.
You got the cards.
But you get the cards and then you know what to do.
What are the other things?
So yeah, you can look at this stuff too. There's like workbooks and stuff. Like he did not fill out anything in here, so I thought that was interesting.
We're only 41 pages in, so.
Well, I know, but I wanted some sort of solution right away.
Okay, Chris, are you ready to share any takeaways that you got, 2 or 3? from the book?
Oh, okay. So, I assume that this is where it's going, but the most important thing that is put forward is that trust is based on dialogue, and an open dialogue, and then it starts at the very beginning, talking about the way in which we have to accept critical dialogue. We can just talk how we want to talk now, right? Is this being videotaped?
You laugh, but what we're doing is everybody's having a chance to give a take.
We have not adjourned the formal
meeting.
Okay, so we'll keep the profanity out of the discussion. But it's really important that not just that we be respectful toward each other, but that we can accept criticism. You know, like, I always tell my students, like, the mark of an educated person is being able to entertain the ideas of other people without having to reject them. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that I think we really have to work on with each other, is that we really do have a high degree of respect for each other, but we also have a high degree of disagreement on some fundamental issues, and that's totally okay. But how we create the behavior, which is what the end of the second chapter is all about, these things have to be intentional. I mean, like, I bet your family is super awesome. But sometimes our family here isn't exactly super awesome, and so we have to be intentional about how the dialogue operates so that we can create the environment where we're okay to put like ideas, like people aren't always going to agree with it. In fact, people never do. And that's totally okay, because some good things can come out of the way in which we create these kind of conflicts within the board. That's part of the intentional way in which we create trust. Because you just sit on your ideas and you don't bring them up, that's going to create a pervasive distrust and dissatisfaction.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because I want these other people to have a chance, and we're only doing 15 minutes and Joe's minutes total.
Oh, I had a whole lecture.
Jim.
I think I have a point that Penny didn't bring up, which is mistrust doubles the cost of doing business, which I can relate to quite frequently, because my example is if I hire a new employee and I don't trust that they're doing something, I have to double check it, which takes time away from me. In my office, if it's not something that a licensed professional needs to be doing, efficiency-wise, I should be hiring staff to do it. So if I have to double check and make sure someone else is doing it, that costs me a lot of money, a lot of resources. And then my second thought of this whole thing is trying to, I mean, Chris was touching on this a little bit, trying to air my disagreement with something like Chris Freeman says without sounding disrespectful or like I devalue him and his ideas on this board. Although Chris and I probably differ on a lot of things, I respect what he brings to the board, and I still want to hear what he says, and I still want to argue with him about it. But it's how I do it, and I don't personally attack him or try to make him look worse. Sorry to use you as a specific example, Chris, but it's just kind of... So I sit here many times quietly just kind of processing the rest of you guys and how you interact. So that's kind of my take on it.
Dan?
Well, two things. This weekend, last weekend, one of the sessions, one of the folks said, perceptions are always valid. Perceptions are always partial. In other words, your perception is valid from your vantage point, but you don't always know the whole thing. It's, the elephant and the blind man. I feel what I feel, but I'm not able to get the whole thing. So we have to trust that, our intentions are hopefully honest and forthright, that we have we're all here for a purpose and we all buy into our vision. We just have different opinions and ideas about how to reach it. None of them are absolutely wrong, none of them are absolutely correct. But we need to synthesize and just bring the best ideas forward. The other thing is, in teaching about autistic kids, how to deal with autistic kids, the number one thing that a teacher has to do right away is work on developing trust with that kid. If that kid doesn't trust you, you're the enemy. Because they don't, bonding is not in their nature. And so again, bonding is a part of this. We have to work out a way to basically see ourselves as a community, as an interrelated community. And that trust is a major element to that.
Jim, did you want to say anything else?
Well, one thing, kind of the green, or the clean and green thing. I think the reason, at least from my perspective too, in raising my own kids, is that the reason it was such a learning experience for him, and something he remembered, is because it was significant. You can give a kid a task to do that really doesn't matter. And if they do it or not, it doesn't matter. But cleaning that lawn and mowing that lawn is a big deal. And so a lot of times, if you want to develop whether it's trust or create a learning experience for somebody, you got to give them something that's real, something that's significant and important. That was pretty much it.
Okay, for me, I had a couple things. One of them, and I think Joe likes one too, we talked about this, high trust, high speed, low cost. So if you trust one another and you move forward, and you're not going to be spending money on a lot of other things. The other thing that I thought was really good, I have a lot, but this is the only other one I'm going to say, based on time. In a company, or we're not really a company, we're a school district, high trust materially improves communication, yeah, a lot, collaboration, execution, innovation, strategy, engagement, partnering, and relationships with all stakeholders. So that's all. Anybody have anything else to say before we get, how are we doing on time?
2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Very good.
Do we have
Okay, I do have.
session?
What's our assignment?
Okay. No, wait. I have to ask you just a couple things first. Wait a minute. Was that enough? Was that okay reading for you? I don't want to give you more than you can handle in a 2-week period. Is that okay?
Yes, that was ample.
Okay.
Summer's kind of a quiet
Okay, then I would ask that you read through page 74 for the next meeting, page 74. And one more thing I'd like to say, is it okay to let them know about the administrative team?
We're going to finalize that tomorrow.
Okay, so never mind.
We're working on choosing a book for our book study for the administrative team, and this is my preference, and I think
Yeah, and they were
Just so you don't have to read this one.
inspired by, they were inspired by us.
Genius.
But I do want to get the input from the principals before.
Okay.
before you
But
start.
the idea of them wanting to do a book study was inspired by the book.
For sure.
Okay, now.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second. Second. Aye. All in favor?